from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The Berkshire Hathaway 2019 meeting was held on Saturday, the 5th of May in Omaha, Nebraska. It is an annual event and it has been going on for a very, very long time. Berkshire Hathaway is 54 years old. The chair is Warren Buffett, otherwise known as the Oracle of Omaha, along with his partner and sidekick, Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger is 96 years old. Warren Buffett is 88 years old. They hold this fest, including a run. I believe they had a run this year, and a day-long meeting where people line up very early in the morning to get into the arena there in Omaha, and sat and watched about 5 hours of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. They actually take questions from the audience, which is stockholders of Berkshire Hathaway, and they give a report on the financial condition of Berkshire. We'll start off here with some basic questions from CNBC of what would be asked, and make some commentary on those. And in our outpiece here, you'll actually hear a series of interviews from the meeting by Warren Buffett and other people in the meeting there in Omaha. Now, one thing to understand here that the Yahoo Financial is the exclusive cover of this, and he make it a little bit more difficult to cover it. First of all, I was unfortunately traveling on the 4th of May, which was a Saturday. I suppose we should introduce ourselves here. This is a numbers man in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. And back to the Oracle of Omaha and his Woodstock for capitalists. That is obviously the theme there. Warren Buffett made the comment, he is a card-carrying capitalist. My inference from that is that Warren Buffett feels the pinch of the time, so to speak, sort of silent and not so silent red baiting that's going on out there in the general atmosphere, the political atmosphere, that no doubt reverberates into the financial markets and all over the place like a proverbial typhoon or earthquake or whatever event you'll have. And Warren Buffett did talk about climate. For those that are not familiar with the Berkshire Hathaway setup, it is a very large company that employs some 370 plus thousand people in various enterprises. From Geico, the insurance people, they're also in the reinsurance business. They have a real estate outlet. They own the Omaha-Herald and a bunch of other newspapers, and he'll comment about the state of newspapers. And of course they bought Kraft and Heinz there, and he'll talk about that. They are into financial institutions, Wells Fargo. He'll talk about Wells Fargo, and we'll give our take on Wells Fargo and why things happened there did in fact happen, and some of the other highlights. But first, let's get to the CNBC piece here. We'll sedge us into our brief situation here. These are 5 things stockholders would want to ask at the annual meeting, and the first is continues to underperform, Berkshire Hathaway that is, to the broader market. Investors want to know what the Oracle of Omaha plans to do to rectify this. Well, doing basically what they've been doing. Second, the Berkshire Hathaway is sitting on a massive pile of cash. Very good idea in these times, $100 billion at least. They want to know where he plans to do that. Well, he's waiting to see what comes up. There's also the Kraft Heinz issue. Berkshire took a mass hit on the Kraft Heinz investment last year when the consumer market slashed the value of consumer goods market are the two popular brands. Well, that's an interesting situation we'll get to right now, the whole idea of branding. Excuse me. We wrote a paper several years ago entitled The End of Branding. Well, it's not the end of branding, but in reality, but what it's turned into be is a different type of branding. The old Heinz ketchup and Kraft brand of food stuffs is old hatch. What has basically happened in the food retailing racket, you see the chains increasingly promote their own brands, whether it be Kroger, Safeway, etc. They have their own house brands. They've always had their own house brands, but they are promoting them more and more now that are manufactured perhaps by Heinz, whomever, under their own brand. And as you see, that increasing situation commoditizes the name of the brand. We see that all across, not only in foodstuffs, but particularly in technology. We'll talk about that a little later here. But yes, they did underperform, and Buffett said that basically paid too much for a Kraft, and the Heinz deal was a better deal. And of course, you look at it from a logic standpoint. Why did they two ketchup makers combine? Well, what had happened? They'd gotten out of the ketchup business, their core game, and Kraft has got into many other things other than macaroni and cheese. And so has Heinz. They have Oscar Mayer and all these other brands, but these brands again are competing against multiple brands. And also what they're up against is demographic changes, particularly in the American population. Different types of foods are coming in. So-called, what used to be called ethnic foods, are becoming more and more of a market share. So you'll see foods imported from all over the world, Mexico, etc., various emerging economies, Kenya, Ghana, at a store where I shop. All of these products are visible. And from China, from Thailand, from the Koreas, etc., and from India. As those populations increase in the U.S., those types of foods will come in, and new brands come in. The same with Coca-Cola, soft drinks coming over all over the world, so-called soft drinks, which are basically juice-based drinks, natural drinks, particularly in Mexico and the rest of Latin Central America, China, etc. They have long used these types of drinks, which are much healthier than so-called sugar water from a Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, etc. Now they're selling probably more bottled water than any other type of item that they have. Somewhere in the can presentation, there is a CEO of Coca-Cola talking about what to do. Now in Japan, they've actually put alcohol in their Coke product. It was a premixed, I suppose, highball, or what do you want to call it. And that has increasingly come. You'll find various rums, etc., that are a mixture of drinks and flavors. The vodka. Remember, my wife used to actually make it like they did in Moscow. Anyway, one of those things there. So that has changed, and that in itself has changed other things. Now, also the energy investments that Berkshire Hathaway is in have changed. They have the rail component there, but the hauling that they once did of petroleum product is now being carried by pipelines. So the Burlington Northern is not doing what it used to do. Now this is the S&P, so-called S&P 500 is beating Berkshire. Under the leadership, Berkshire Hathaway shares are up more than 1,000,000% on book value. That's since 1964, when they had better days. And according to the latest annual letter, the S&P is around 15,000%, including dividends. But that has been the case recently. Berkshire's total returns are trailing the S&P over the past 1, 5, 10, and 15 years. For example, $1,000 invested in in 2009, that would be roughly 10 years ago, would be worth $3,500 now, while an investment, if you were lucky, in the S&P 500 would be worth more than $4,000. A word about investing in the market. It's a situation we've seen. Even mutual funds that were very aggressive in terms of their returns, but the average return of stockholders' value over the years is roughly about 10% or less via taxes and brokerage fees, etc. So this would put the Berkshire, remember now, it's a long-term investment model that they have. So again, you're talking about 10, 20, 30 years of investment or more. And just looking at the people at the annual meeting, many of those people are in their late 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So it is a different type of situation. Then we go to the tech companies, and would be Apple, and they were invested in Apple, but Apple can only sell so many iPhones. And now they went into Amazon. But one has to understand that these particular tech companies are victims of market hype. And what's the next big thing? Investors are always looking for that. Well, the next big thing is not Microsoft anymore. They have reinvented themselves. They're not in primarily the consumer software business or even the business software business. They're in something that is called software on demand. That's where you go to the so-called cloud. In reality, you go into a data center to access Microsoft 360 and various other Microsoft products, including Azure, the cloud platform from Microsoft. Same thing with Amazon. Amazon used to be a bookseller. Now they are fully a marketplace. They're also the largest cloud provider in the world, and with services added, Amazon services, which the money now is in these quote-unquote services. It's the same old scheme that you're upselling. You buy one service and they sell you a dozen services. That is more the model. So that is what the Berkshire Hathaways of the world are all about. And wanting to know where the surplus, I guess $12 billion there, and buybacks. And many of us in the progressive community have not looked favorably on buybacks, because what buybacks do is they don't improve the working conditions of people that work there, include relative to their salaries, but they enhance the value of the stock to the stockholders. So that's the age-old question: is the company in the business to enhance the lives of the workers, or just the lives of the stockholders and CEOs? And in the end, depending on type of company, you have the consumers. So that is a big situation there. According to some guy named Trip Miller, I'm not opposed to them buying a lot more of Berkshire. Well, that in itself, why do they buy this? Why does any of these companies buy it? That's so they can enhance their stock price. That is why. And that gives an artificiality to everything. Now, they took a $3 billion hit on Kraft Heinz after cutting value of its Oscar Mayer. That's a branded hot dog. Basically, now investors and analysts want to know what Buffett will move on later. He partnered with a private equity company called 3G Capital out of Brazil. That was in 2013. 2 years later, they helped finance the $49 billion merger with Heinz. So that is a situation. An interview here with Becky Quick. She's a CNBC, that they paid underpaid for Kraft and not for Heinz. Kraft Heinz recent troubles have raised concerns about whether the partnership with Free G Capital has been a weakness there. Usually they are. The problem with equity firms is, to begin with, they can cause problems. Now also, and we went over this on a Numbers Man this week, Occidental Petroleum Company, they're in that outbidding Chevron for Anadarko Petroleum. So there's one of the things there, various other things going on. Will the other people there, Greg Abel and Jay, will they be up on the stage when Charlie and the Oracle or not? Well, who knows? Jay is 67, Abel is 56. So these people are not young people at all. Period there. The other big problem that they have is the Wells Fargo. The problem with Wells Fargo is they made money in banking the old-fashioned way. Curve enter, go to hell. In other words, consumer there, they were selling fake accounts, etc. Now, Warren Buffett said, well, when you have people that are naughty, as one would say, using a term stolen from DJ Trump, of all people, they were naughty. Anyway, it's beyond being naughty. It's beyond the Sloan that they got rid of. Elizabeth Warren is correct on this. Wells Fargo and their some of their leadership should be in jail, must be in jail. And the problem here is the banking practices they did, and why did they do them? To enhance their profitability. They charged consumers for accounts they didn't have, and they never wanted. And the telephone companies used to do this also. They'd sign you up for plans, and if you didn't very carefully look at your bill, there they would be. And these are old practices out there, and these are systemic practices, not to any particular CEO. And basically, Wells was given a slap on the hand. From this mic, we can envision any consumer that has their eyes on the prize, so to speak, would have any dealings with Wells Fargo, unless they were locked into some type of loan situation, not for a checking or a savings account or any of their other services, and something you were locked into. You would not want to deal with Wells Fargo. There are too many other places to go, because they've thrown out the so-called ethics book, which was never in business, but at Howard too, but at Harvard and Yale and various other, and Princeton and Berkeley, they still have a class in ethics. But ethics has never been a long shot. But yet Warren Buffett did not attack Wells Fargo for their unscrupulous and nefarious schemes. He just basically said people make mistakes. Well, I can say from experience in the criminal justice system, dealing with litigation there, representing clients, that I've never seen a client that stole a proverbial paperclip and was able to convince a judge that he just made a mistake. He's either given probation, suspended sentence, or worse. This is the same guy that, or a person that's convicted of, say, under California's law, one joint of marijuana, and then of shoplifting a loaf of bread and some of miscellaneous charge, and 3 strikes, and they were in jail for life. So that's the reality we have in 2019. In winding this up, will Berkshire Hathaway be around in 20 years? The answer there is yes. And to the extent they're probable will be to the extent that branding and various other conditions in the global capitalism exist. things are changing. Markets are changing. We have now these so-called sanctions, which is economic violence against places like Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Democratic Republic, Korea. A long list of people that these sanctions are put by the establishment capitalists. I.e., what I mean there is the U.S., U.K., Canada, Europe to a lesser extent, the European countries, Germany, etc. But all these overlapping interests do come in. And in their basic economy, the U.S., as demographics change and the so-called whiteness of America changes, and if you notice, the board of directors at Berkshire had no people of color on it. It does not reflect the reality. They will have to address that problem as they buy more diverse companies. Now, some of the companies that they have, there's not a call, but when you start dealing with Kraft Heinz, these consumer companies, yes, the demand has to be made. And that is one of the big problems. The demand has not been made to Berkshire. We're making it right here. Get your house in order. Get the diversity in the door. The last stockholders meeting, they went over that, and Warren Buffett said, well, the picture on the calendar will be the same next year. And it is. Because the demand was not, or the megaphone was not put there. We'll have to talk to Jesse about that. It's part of the corporate project there. Has been with Microsoft. Even Nate Silver bowed to it. CBS got in trouble with even their political unit. So more and more, as we get more and more diversity out here, diversity in broadcasting, the broadcast system, digital media, Ice Cube and some other people, the rapper, were trying to buy some sporting stations. I think there were 20-some of those, and Sinclair got the deal instead of them. They got ripped off. So these demands have to continually be out here. They're in the campaign with Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. And we hear the word socialism. Even DJ Trump claimed he's going to run against socialism. We hadn't heard much from DJ on that. His nefarious schemes in Venezuela have sort of backfired, and now I suppose they're planning the military option. But again, that will all affect in the long run what Berkshire does. And their newspapers, well, the newspapers, are toast, but they have digital products there. He's bought, was it Newswire or something of that nature? So in other words, all of these companies will continue to be more agile, develop this term, than they were in the past. On the 5th of May, 2019. Numbers man here from the financial side of WBRN Radio and the Boston Network. Network. I'll get it out in a minute. Have a good weekend. Keep your eye on the prize of your consumer. For businesses, obviously, continue to do what you are doing. Make it a productive next week, and it will be there, no doubt about it. We looked incidentally on numbers, man, this week in economics. The Fed's recent meeting, we have the speech there by Jerome Powell, who Buffett said is the best person for the job. And there was a little here, before I forget, about negative interest rates, and the Oracle talked about that in terms of some of the classics go back to Keynes. And you can also go to Paul Samuelson. That's what we used at the time, his book in Basic Economics. You won't find negative interest rates, but the takeaway there is the reason you have negative interest rates is the nature of capitalism. Very dysfunctional. That's why you have in quote-unquote good economic times quantitative easing, calls by the present administration to lower the interest rate, excuse me, and not raise the interest rate. What that basically, the takeaway there is the present day capitalism is on a rocky foundation, literally. That's why various pundits out here see the R word coming, and yes, it will come. The Phillips curve is a little better off, and also the other investors' curve is not as inverted as it was. You can go to Numbers Man. We have the issues of there, and be a little bit skeptical also of GDP. Q1 or April job numbers, they go up and down. Good day.
Berkshire, in the form of more regulations, higher corporate taxes, or even calls for breakups among the many companies we own if they were to win. And how do you think about your own politics as a fiduciary of our company, and at the same time as someone who has said that simply being a business leader doesn't mean you've put your citizenship in a blind trust?
Yeah, I have said that you do not put your citizenship in a blind trust, but you also don't speak on behalf of your company. You do speak as a citizen if you speak, and therefore you have to be careful about when you do speak, because it's going to be assumed you're speaking on behalf of your company. Berkshire Hathaway certainly in 54 years has never and will never made a contribution to a presidential candidate. I don't think we've made a contribution to any political candidate, but I don't want to say for 54 years that we don't do it now. We operate in several regulated industries, and our railroad and our utility, as a practical matter, they have to have a presence in Washington and in the state legislatures in which they operate. So we have a few, I don't know how many, political action committees which existed when we bought it. We bought the companies at subsidiaries, and I think unquestionably they make some contributions simply to achieve the same access as their competitors. I mean, if the trucking industry is going to lobby, I'm sure the railroad industry is going to lobby. But the rule is, that people do not pursue their own political interests with your money here. We've had one or two managers over the years, for example, that would do some fundraising where they were fundraising from people who were suppliers to them or something of the sort. And if I ever find out about it, that ends promptly. But my position at Berkshire is not to be used to further my own political beliefs, but my own political beliefs can be expressed as a person, not as a representative of Berkshire. When the campaign is important, I try to minimize it, but it's no secret that in the last election, for example, I raised money. I won't give money to PACs. I accidentally did it one time. I didn't know it was a PAC, but I don't do it. But I've raised substantial sums. I don't like the way money is used in politics. I've written op-ed pieces for the New York Times in the past on the influence of money in politics. I spent some time with John McCain many years ago, before McCain-Feingold, and on ways to try to limit it, but the world has developed in a different way. On your question about I will just say I'm a card-carrying capitalist, but I believe we wouldn't be sitting here except for the market system and the rule of law and some things that are embodied in this country. So you don't have to worry about me changing in that manner, but I also think that capitalism does involve regulation. It involves taking care of people who are left behind, particularly when the country gets enormously prosperous. But beyond that, I have no Berkshire podium for pushing anything. Charlie?
Well, I think we're all in favor of some kind of a government social safety net in a country as prosperous as ours. What a lot of us don't like is the vast stupidity with which parts of that social safety net are managed by the government. It'd be much better if we could do it more wisely. But I think it also might be better if we did it more liberally.
Yeah, one of the reasons we're involved in this effort, along with J.P. Morgan and Amazon, with Jamie Dimon and Jeff Bezos, on the medical question, is we do have as much money going, 3.3 or 3.4 trillion. We have as much money going to medical care as we have funding the federal government, and it's gone from 5 to 17% or 18%, while actually the amount going to the federal government has stayed about the same at 17%. So we hope there's some major improvements from the private sector, because I generally think the private sector does a better job than the public sector in most things. But I also think that if the private sector doesn't do something, you'll get a different sort of answer. And I like to think that the private sector can come up with a better answer than the public sector in that respect. But I will probably. It depends who's nominated, but I voted for plenty of Republicans over the years. I even ran for delegate to the Republican National Convention in 1960. But we are not. I don't think the country will go into socialism in 2020 or in 2040 or 2060. Yeah.
And a producer of consumer goods, what do you make of the uncertain outlook for good full-time automation and temporary employment?
If we'd asked that question 200 years ago, and somebody said, with the outlook for development of farm machinery and tractors and combines and so on, meaning that 90% of the people on farms were going to lose their job, it would look terrible, wouldn't it? But our economy and our people, our system, has been remarkably ingenious in achieving whatever we have now, 160 million jobs, when throughout the period ever since 1776 we've been figuring out ways to get rid of jobs. That's what capitalism does, and it produces more and more goods per person. And we never know exactly where they're going to come from. I mean, I don't know what, if you were whatever occupation. Well, if you were in the passenger train business, I mean, that was going to change. But we find ways in this economy to employ more and more people, and we've got now more people employed than ever in the history of the country, even though company after company, and particularly in heavy industry and that sort of thing, has been trying to figure out naturally how to get more productive all the time, which means turning out the same number of goods with fewer people, or turning out more goods with the same number. That is capitalism. I don't think you need to worry about American ingenuity running out. I mean, you look at people in all kinds of businesses, and they like to make money, but they really like to be inventive. They like to do things, and this economy, it works. It will continue to work, and it'll be it's very tough in certain industries, and there will be dislocations. We won't be making as many horseshoes and that sort of thing cars come along and all of that. But we do find ways now to employ whatever we're employing, 155, whatever it is, million people, and supporting a population of 330 million people, when we started with 4 million people, with 80% of the labor being employed on farms. So this system works, and it will continue to work. And I don't know what the next big thing will be. I do know there will be a next big thing. Charlie?
Well, we want to shift the scut work to the robots to the extent we can. That's what we've been doing, as Warren said, for 200 years. Nobody wants to go back to being a blacksmith or scooping along the street, picking up the horsemen or whatever the hell people used to do. We're glad to have that work eliminated. And a lot of this worry about the future comes from leftists who worry terribly that the people at the bottom of the economic pyramid have had a little stretch when the people at the top got ahead faster. That happened by accident because we were in so much trouble that we had to flood the world with money and drive interest rates down to zero. And of course that drove asset prices up and helped the rich. Nobody did that because they suddenly loved the rich. It was just an accident, and it will soon pass. We want to have all this productivity improvement, and we shouldn't worry a little about the fact that one class or another is a little ahead at one stretch.
Charlie and I, we worked in a grocery store, and when people ordered a can of peas, we had ladders that we climbed up to reach the can of peas, and then we placed it in a folding box, and then we put it on the truck. And if you looked at the amount of food actually transferred between the producer and the person who consumed it, and the number of people involved in the transaction, it was, I don't know whether it was 1/3 or 1/4 or 1/5 as efficient as the best way now to get food delivered to you. And
the food was worse.
and my grandfather was distressed about the fact that this particular credit and delivery kind of store would be eliminated, and it was eliminated. But society progressed.
It's coming back.
Pardon?
It's coming back.
It's coming back, but more efficiently. Yeah. Anyway, we've seen a little creative destruction, and frankly, we're glad that it freed us up to go into the investment business. It worked out better for us.
Express and Seas, as well as media companies that has helped these brands protect and widen their moats, such as Cap Cities, ABC, and the Washington Post. In the past, you have also generally avoided investing in technology companies, pointing out how quickly technology changes and how hard it is to build a circle of competence in it. Today, we seem to be in a world where some of the most dominant companies in the world are technology companies, and we have built powerful platforms such as Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft in America, and Alibaba and Tencent in China. These companies all have wide moats, strong brands, and are led by brilliant and entrepreneurs.
That's good.
My question to you is this. If Berkshire is to honor its tradition of investing in wide moats and strong brands, and especially in companies that are also capital efficient, do you think that Berkshire needs to expand its investing lens to include more of these leading technology platforms? In other words, do you believe that you need to adapt your model of wide moats and strong brands to embrace, not avoid, technology?
I think the answer is maybe.
I think the answer is to put her on the board, and it'll bring down the average age enormously. We won't get criticized as much. You're exactly right in that we do like moats, and we used to be able to identify them in a newspaper that was the only newspaper in town, or in TV stations where we felt the dominant positions, and we felt the product was underpriced in terms of advertising it. We saw it in brands sometimes, and it is true that in the tech world, if you can build a moat, it can be incredibly valuable. I've not felt the confidence that I was the best one to judge that in many cases. It wasn't hard to figure out who was winning at any given time or what their business was about, but there were a huge number of people that knew more about the game than I did, and we don't want to try and win at a game we don't understand. We may hire people such as Ted and Todd that are better at understanding certain areas of investing than I am, or maybe even Charlie is. But the principles haven't changed. You're right that some of the old ones have lost their moat, and you're right that there are going to be companies in the future that have them that will be enormously valuable, and we hope we can identify one every now and then, but we'll still stay within where we think we know what we're doing, and obviously we'll make mistakes even within that area. But we won't go into something because somebody else tells us it's a good thing to do. I mean, we are not going to subcontract your money to somebody else's judgment. You can take your money and follow somebody else's judgment, but we're not in the business of thinking that if we hire 10 people with specialties in this area or that it will lead to superior investment results. And we do worry that we could blow a lot of money that way. So we'll do our best to enlarge the circle of competence of the people at Berkshire so that we don't miss so many. But we'll miss a lot in the future. We missed a lot in the past. The main thing to do is to find things where our batting average is going to be high. And if we miss the biggest ones, that really doesn't bother us as long as the things we do with money work out okay. Charlie?
Well, I think we've still got an awful lot of companies with big moats, and a lot of them are and some of our industrial brands were just incredibly strong in the niches we're in. So the Berkshire shareholders don't need to worry about we're just one big morass of unprofitability or anything like that. But we have not covered ourselves with glory in the new fields.
Yeah. We won't end up all in buggy whips, though, or anything of it. But it's a very good question, and it's what we focus on all of the time. And
we're trying to improve.
And we hope we see you back here for your fourth next year.
And so I say, well, it reminds me of a story they told about Mozart. A young man came to him and he said, I want to compose symphonies, and I want to talk to you about that. And Mozart said, how old are you? And the man said, 22. And Mozart said, you're too young to do symphonies. And the guy says, but you were writing symphonies when you were 10 years old. He says, yes, but I wasn't running around asking other people how to do it.
We wish you well. And actually we really do, because the fact you asked that sort of a question isn't to some extent indicative of the fact that you got the right attitude going in.
It isn't that easy to be a great investor. I don't think we've quite made it.
And I-21 stopped in Las Vegas. We just got, my Aunt Alice gave me the car and said, have a good time, and we went west. So we stopped in the Flamingo, and I looked around, and I saw all of these well-dressed, they dressed better in those days, well-dressed people who had come, in some cases, thousands of miles away. And this was before jets, so transportation wasn't as good. And they came to do something that every damn one of them knew was mathematically dumb. And I told Susie, I said, we are going to make a lot of money. I mean, imagine people going to stick money on some roulette number with a 0 and a 00 there, and knowing the percent. They all could do it, and they just do it. And I have to say, Bitcoin has rejuvenated that feeling in me. Directed over to them at this meeting. I don't think, this format will not be around forever, and if it's better to get them up on the stage, we'll be happy to do it. Ted and Todd, they're basically not going to answer investment questions. We regard investment decisions as proprietary, basically. They belong to Berkshire. And we are not an investment advisory organization. So that is counter to the interests of Berkshire for them to be talking about securities they own. It's a counter to the interest of Berkshire for Charlie or me to be doing it. We've done better because we don't publish every day what we're buying and selling. I mean, if somebody's working on a new product at Apple, or somebody's working on a new drug, or they're assembling property or something of the sort, they do not go out and tell everybody in the world exactly what they're doing every day. And we're trying to generate ideas and investment, and we do not believe in telling the world what we're doing every day, except to the extent that we're legally required. But it's a good idea. Charlie?
Well, one of the reasons we have trouble with these questions is because Berkshire is so very peculiar. There's only one thing like it. We have a different kind of unbureaucratic way of making decisions. There aren't any people in headquarters. We don't have endless committees deliberating forever and making bad decisions. We're radically different, and it's awkward being so different. But I don't want to be like everybody else because this has worked better. So I think you're just going to have to endure us.
We do think that it's a huge corporate asset, which may only surface very occasionally and depending very much on how the world is around us. But to be the one place, I think, in the world almost where somebody can call on a Saturday morning and meet on Sunday morning and have a $10 billion commitment, and nobody in the world doubts whether that commitment will be upheld, and it's not subject to any kind of welching on the part of the company that's doing it. It's got nothing involved other than Berkshire's word, and that's an asset that every now and then will be worth a lot of money to Berkshire, and I don't really think it will be subject to competition. And Ted and Todd in particular are an additional pipeline, and have proven to be an additional pipeline in terms of facilitating the exercise of that ability. I mean, things come in through them that for one reason or another I might not hear about otherwise. So they have expanded our universe. In the markets we've had in recent years, that hasn't been important. I can see periods where they would be enormously valuable. Just take the question that was raised by the fellow from Winnipeg about weak covenants in bonds. I mean, we could have a situation, who knows when, who knows where, or who knows whether, but we could have a situation where there could be massive defaults in the junk bond type market. We've had those a couple times and we made a fair amount of money off of them, but Ted and Todd would multiply our effectiveness in a big way if such a period comes along, or some other types of periods come along. They're very, very, very useful to Berkshire. The call happened to come in on Friday from Brian Moynihan of CEO of Bank of America, and has done an incredible job. But we have a better chance of getting more calls and having them properly filtered and everything, appropriately filtered, the next time conditions get chaotic than we did last time, and that's important. Charlie?
Well, I do think it's true that if the world goes to hell in a handbasket, that you people will be in the right company. We've got a lot of cash and we know how to behave well in a panic. And if the world doesn't go to hell, are things so bad now? And I also want to report that your vice chairman is getting new social distinction. I've been invited during this gathering to go to a happy hour put on by the Bitcoin people. Tried to figure out what the Bitcoin people do in their happy hour, and I finally figured it out. They celebrate the life and work of Judas Iscariot.
Is your invitation still good? Well, Bitcoin, actually, on my honeymoon in 1952, my bride, 19, and I, 21, stopped in Las Vegas. We just got, my Aunt Alice gave me the car and said, have a good time, and we went west. So we stopped in the Flamingo, and I looked around, and I saw all of these well-dressed, they dressed better in those days, well-dressed people who had come, in some cases, thousands of miles away. And this was before jets, so transportation wasn't as good. And they came to do something that every damn one of them knew was mathematically dumb. And I told Susie, I said, we are going to make a lot of money. I mean, imagine people going to stick money on some roulette number with a 0 and a 00 there and knowing the percent. They all could do it, and they just do it. And I have to say, Bitcoin has rejuvenated that feeling in me.
I'm the market. But by your having Berkshire hold such a large amount of cash and T-bills, it seems to me you don't practice what you preach. I'm thinking that a good alternative would be for you to invest most of Berkshire's excess cash in a well-diversified index fund until you find an attractive acquisition or buy back stock. Had you done that over the past 15 years, all the time keeping the $20 billion cash cushion you want, I estimate that at the end of 2018, the company's $112 billion balance in cash equivalents, and short-term investments in T-bills would have instead been worth about $155 billion. The difference between the two figures is an opportunity cost equal to more than 12% of Berkshire's current book value. What is your response to what I say? And I forgot to say, the question is from Mike Elzhar, who is with the Colony Group located in Boca Raton, Florida.
That's a perfectly decent question, and I wouldn't quarrel with the numbers. And I would say that is an alternative, for example, that my successor may wish to employ, because on balance I would rather own an index fund than carry treasury bills. I would say that if we'd instituted that policy in 2007 or 8, we might have been in a different position in terms of our ability to move late in 2008 or 2009. So it has certain execution problems with hundreds of billions of dollars than it does if you were having a similar policy with $1 billion or $2 billion or something of the sort. But it's a perfectly rational observation, and certainly looking back on 10 years of a bull market, it really jumps out at you. But I would argue that if you were working smaller numbers, it would make a lot of sense. And if you're working with large numbers, it might well make sense in the future at Berkshire to operate that way. We committed $10 billion a week ago, and there are conditions under which, and they're not remote, they're not likely in any given week or month or year, but there are conditions under which we could spend $100 billion very, very quickly. And if we did, if those conditions existed, we'd be capital very well deployed and much better than in an index fund. And so we're operating on the basis that we will get chances to deploy capital. They will come in clumps in all likelihood, and they will come when other people don't want to allocate capital. Charlie, what do you think about it?
Well, I plead guilty to being a little more conservative with the cash than other people, but I think that's all right. We could have put all the money into a lot of securities that would have done better than the S&P with 20/20 hindsight. Remember, we had all that extra cash all that period if something had come along in the way of opportunities and so on. I don't think it's a sin to be a little strong on cash when you're as big a company as we are. We don't have to. I watched Harvard use the last ounce of their cash, including all their prepaid tuition from the parents, and plunge it into the market at exactly the wrong moment and make a lot of forward commitments to private equity. And they suffered like 2 or 3 years of absolute agony. We don't want to be like Harvard.
Plus timber and a whole bunch of things.
What?
Plus timber and
Yeah. We're not going to change.
No. We do like having a lot of money to be able to operate very fast and very big, and we don't. And maybe we won't. We know we won't get those opportunities frequently. I don't think. Certainly, in the next 20 or 30 years, there'll be 2 or 3 times when it'll be raining gold, and all you have to do is go outside. But we don't know when they will happen, and we have a lot of money to commit. And I would say that if you told me I had to either carry short-term treasury bills or have index funds and just let that money be invested in America generally, I would take the index funds. But we still have hopes. And the one thing you should very definitely understand about Berkshire is that we run the business in a way that we think is consistent with serving shareholders who have virtually all of their net worth in Berkshire. I happen to be in that position myself, but I would do it that way under any circumstances. We have a lot of people who trust us, who really have disproportionate amounts of Berkshire compared to their net worth if you were to follow standard investment procedures. And we want to make money for everybody, but we want to make very, very sure that we don't lose permanently money for anybody that buys our stock somewhere around intrinsic business value to begin with. We just have an aversion to having 1 million plus shareholders, maybe as many as 2 million, and having a lot of them ever really lose money if they're willing to stay with us for a while. And we know how people behave when the world generally is upset, and they want to be with something. I think they want to be with something that they feel is like the Rock of Gibraltar, and we have a real disposition toward that group.
Farmers Investment Club has 30 partners, all of whom are active or retired San Francisco police officers. Several of our members have worked in the fraud detail and have often commented after the years-long fraudulent behavior of Wells Fargo employees should have warranted jail sentences for several dozen. Yet Wells just pays civil penalties and changes management. As proud shareholders of Berkshire, we cannot understand Mr. Buffett's relative silence compared to his vigorous public pronouncement many years ago on Solomon's misbehavior. Why so quiet?
Yeah, I would say this. As I see it, although, I have read no reports internally or anything like that, but it looks to me like Wells made some big mistakes in what they incentivize. And as Charlie says, there's nothing like incentives, but they can incentivize the wrong behavior. And I've seen that a lot of places. And that clearly existed at Wells. The interesting thing is, to the extent that they set up fake accounts, a couple million of them that had no balance in them, that could not possibly have been profitable to Wells. So you can incentivize some crazy things. The problem is, I'm sure, is that, and I don't really have any insider information on it at all, but when you find a problem, you have to do something about it. And I think that's where they probably made a mistake at Wells Fargo. They made it at Solomon. I mean, John Goodfriend would never have played around with the government. He was the CEO of Solomon in 1991. He never would have done what the bond trader did, that played around with the rules that the federal government had about government bond bidding. But when he heard about it, he didn't immediately notify the Federal Reserve. And he heard about it in late April, and May 15th, the government bond auction came along, and Paul Moser did the same thing he'd done before and gamed the auction. And at this point, John Goodfriend, the destiny of Solomon was straight downhill from that point forward, because essentially he heard about a pyromaniac, and he let him keep the box of matches. And at Wells, my understanding, there was an article in the Los Angeles Times maybe a couple of years before the whole thing was exposed, and somebody ignored that article. And Charlie has beaten me over the head all the years at Berkshire, because we have 390,000 employees, and I will guarantee you that some of them are doing things that are wrong right now. There's no way to have a city of 390,000 people and not need a policeman or a court system. And some people don't follow the rules, and you can incentivize the wrong behavior. You've got to do something about it when it happens. Wells has become, Exhibit 1 in recent years, but if you go back a few years, you can almost go down. There's quite a list of banks where people behave badly, and where I would not say, I don't know the specifics at Wells, but I've actually written in the annual report that they talk about moral hazard if they allow people the shareholders of Wells have paid a price. The shareholders of Citicorp paid a price. The shareholders of Goldman Sachs, the shareholders of Bank of America, they paid billions and billions of dollars, and they didn't commit the acts. And of course, nobody did go. There were no jail sentences, and that is infuriating. But the lesson that was taught was not that the government would bail you out, because the government got its money back, but the shareholders of the various banks paid many, many billions of dollars. And I don't have any advice for anybody running a business, except when you find out something is leading to bad results or bad behavior, if you're in the top job, you've got to take action fast. And that's why we have hotlines. That's why when we get certain anonymous letters, we turn them over to the audit committee or to outside investigators, and I will guarantee you that we will have some people who do things that are wrong at Berkshire in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, and 50 years. You cannot have 390,000 people. And it's the one thing that always worries me about my job, because I've got to hear about those things and I've got to do something about them when I do hear about them. Charlie?
Well, I don't think people ought to go to jail for honest errors of judgment. It's bad enough to lose your job. And I don't think that any of those top officers was deliberately malevolent in any way. We're talking about honest errors in judgment. And I don't think Tim Sloan even committed honest errors of misjudgment. I just think he was an accidental casualty that didn't deserve the trouble.
Yeah,
I wish this Tim Sloan was still there.
Yeah, there's no evidence that he did a thing, but he stepped up to take a job that where he was going to be a piñata, basically, for all kinds of investigations. And rightfully, Wells should be checked out on everything they do. All banks should. I mean, they get a government guarantee, and they receive trillions of dollars in deposits, and they do that basically because of the FDIC, and if they abuse that, they should pay a price. And if anybody does anything like a Paul Moser did, for example, of Solomon, they ought to go to jail. Paul Moser only went to jail for 4 months, but if you're breaking laws, you should be prosecuted on it. If you do a lot of dumb things, I wish they wouldn't go away. The CEOs wouldn't go away so rich under those circumstances. But people will do dumb things. I actually proposed, I think it may have been in one of the annual reports even, I proposed that if a bank gets to where it needs government assistance, that basically the responsible CEO should lose his net worth and his spouse's net worth if he doesn't want the job under those circumstances. And I think that the directors, I think they should come after the directors for the last 5 years. I think I proposed of everything they've received. But it's the shareholders who pay. I mean, if we own 9% of Wells, whatever this has cost, 9% of it is being borne by us, and it's very hard to tie it directly. One thing you should know, incidentally, though, is that the FDIC, which was started, I think it was started January 1st, 1934, but it was a New Deal proposal. And the FDIC has not cost the United States government a penny. It now has about $100 billion in it, and that money has all been put in there by the banks, and that's covered all the losses of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of financial institutions. And I think the impression is that the government guarantees saved the banks, but the government money did not save the banks. The banks' money as an industry not only has paid every loss, but they've accumulated an extra $100 billion, and that's the reason the FDIC assessments now are going back down. They had them at a high level, and they had a higher level for the very big banks. So when you hear all the political talk about the banks, they have not cost the federal government a penny. There were a lot of actions that took place that should not have taken place. And there's a lot fewer now, I think, than there were in the period leading up to 2008 and 2009. But some banks will make big mistakes in the future.
A meeting with important financial news, and Berkshire Hathaway's first quarter earnings came out early this morning, and Miles has been digging through those. I think sometimes we forget with all the shopping and all the shareholders around, right, that there's actual earnings that come out.
There is news, yeah. So this morning,
ingredients go in the future. We have a radar screen on everything, but we're not interested in the space. Interesting. So James, switching gears a little bit to the alcohol. Now, alcohol obviously is not regulated as the cannabis industry is. You released an alcoholic drink in Japan. Should we expect that in the U.S., a Coca-Cola alcoholic drink in 2019?
No, and, just to not give a no answer, the U.S. market, firstly, the U.S. market operates very differently in terms of the segmentation of alcohol and non-alcoholic drinks. But in the end, we have so many more things to do and so many opportunities that are closer in to the sweet spot of what we know how to do in the U.S. and many other markets in terms of engaging consumers with our existing portfolio, working with our bottling partners to execute in the marketplace, create value for our customers. There's so much more we can do. As a philosophy, I don't necessarily rule things out forever, but we have to be, and of course we pursue the most logical things first and prioritize in that way.
James, certainly GDP in the U.S. slowed down in the third quarter versus the second quarter, but I didn't see that slowdown in your results. Good quarter in sparkling beverages and in many parts of the portfolio. How are you pulling this off?
Look, I think it's been what's been building over a number of years. We've been investing in our brands. We've been investing in innovation. We've been expanding into more categories, and we've refranchised the system and really helped the bottling partners get stronger, and they're investing in execution. And so I think you see that strength coming through. Of course, that it won't be a straight line. Not every quarter will necessarily be great. But I think what's coming through is the implementation of our strategy and the good results that go with it.
Hey, James, Miles Lupton here with Yahoo Finance. I want to ask you about the trade situation right now globally and just the kind of inflationary impulse that we've seen in a lot of corporate commentary over the last quarter. How are material input costs impacting your business?
From the biggest events to countless little moments, you've experienced a lot. So talk to your doctor and ask if ILEA is right for you. Find out more at ILEATV.com.
Probably carry maybe $400. My wife likes to use.
What is your favorite all-time song, Warren?
It's undoubtedly it's My Way.
Favorite movie?
Well, I like The Bridge on the River Kwai because of there were a lot of lessons in that. Plus, it was enormously fascinating. The ending of that was sort of the story of life, He created the railroad, and he really wanted the enemy to come in and cross it,
Favorite book?
The book that had the most impact on my life was The Intelligent Investor by Ben Graham.
I knew you were going to say that. Favorite TV show?
It would be Nebraska in some huge bowl game and winning.
Got it. Do you ever drink water?
Only under duress.
And finally, what do you carry in your wallet, and how much money do you tend to carry around?
I probably carry maybe $400. My wife likes to use cash, so I just take home a chunk of cash every now and then, and she doles it out. She looks at my billfold and sees whether all the hundreds are gone.
And credit cards?
I've got an American Express card, which I got in 1964, but I pay cash 98% of the time. If I'm in a restaurant, I pay cash. It's just easier.
Tax credit. Is there more to it than that? Should we adjust tax policy? It seems to be going the other way right now.
Well, it is going the other way, but I think the earned income tax credit is the best way to put money in the pockets of people that don't fit well into the market system, but that are perfectly decent citizens and that have made a good bit of the success somebody like I've had with Berkshire or something possible. It wouldn't have happened without the America we have. And if you go back 200 years, and we're all working on, 80% of us are working on farms. The person that's the best at that, working on that farm, whatever it may be, is worth maybe twice the ones that's the worst. I mean, that's the difference between super talent and no talent in the farm economy, picking cotton or whatever it may be. Now, if you're the best middleweight fighter in the world, you may get $20 or $30 million, and if you are just a good citizen, raise nice kids, help in the neighborhood and everything else, but you don't have market-related skills, you'd be good on that farm still, and you would be earning something comparable to most of the people around you. But you don't have something now that as it gets more and more specialized, and it's going to continue to get more specialized, you want two things for that person. You want them to have a decent life. I mean, they live in a country with 60,000 of GDP per person. You want them to have a decent life, and they can. I also think you want them to have a feeling of accomplishment. So you want them to have a job, assuming that they're not handicapped in some way. You want them to have a job, but the minimum wage would be one way to say, well, we'll make sure that they have enough money in their pocket. But that's got a lot of effects in disturbing the market system. They just need more cash. They don't need a higher wage. They need more cash in their pocket. And the government, at a relatively low cost, can provide a decent living for anybody that's working 40 hours a week and has a couple of children. And we've gone in that direction, and it's sort of bipartisan. I mean, you find both Republicans and Democrats for it. I think it would be better not to have one annual payment, that they get it monthly. And I think there's various things you could do, but you want them to feel part of the system, and you want to have them get as more and more of these golden eggs are laid. You want them to get a little more of their share. I don't think there was any economist I've ever read that talked about negative interest rates for long periods of time. I mean, if you go back and read Keynes or you read Samuelson, you read any of them, they do not get into a negative rate environment. I think now there's still 11 trillion that's of government debt around the world that's at a negative rate. So we've never seen it before, and we've never seen, at least the conventional wisdom on a sustained period of long and growing deficits while the economy is getting better, extremely low interest rates, and really very little inflation. So something different is happening, but something different happens all the time. So, and that's one reason economic predictions just don't enter into our decisions. Charlie Munger, my partner, and I, in 54 years now, we've never made a decision based on an economic prediction. We make business predictions about what individual businesses will do over time, and we compare that to what we have to pay for them. But we have never said yes to something because we thought the economy was going to do well in the next year or 2 years, and we've never said no to anything because we were right in the middle of a panic, even if the price was right. For Kraft, we didn't pay too much for Heinz. So when we started out, it was originally a non-public partnership between us, but we did pay too much, in my view, for Kraft. And there's not much you can do about things if you pay too much. Secondly, there's always been a struggle between the retailer and brands. I mean, if I've got a terribly weak brand and I want to get into Walmart, I'm not going to be able to do it. I mean, I have to offer all kinds of crazy concessions, and I want to be in Walmart if I have some sort of consumer packaged goods. The negotiation is way different if you have something essential versus non-essential. 10 years ago, Costco tried to get rid of Coca-Cola. Costco's got terrific loyalty among customers, and their own Kirkland brand is a $39 billion brand now, and it moves from category to category, and they only started in 1992. So they know brands, but in the end, they put Coca-Cola back in. If it had been Royal Crown Cola, they wouldn't have had to put it back in. So there's always that struggle between the brands. I mean, and there always will be. But the retailers net, it has been moving in their direction, particularly, I think, because of the Amazon revolution.
First Walmart, and then...
Walmart.
Right, and then
Walmart,
Amazon.
I mean, but it's been accentuated, I think. We have a new retailing environment now. I mean, it isn't like it goes from night to day, but it moves somewhat. And brands that people have spent billions of dollars developing and sponsoring TV shows or sponsoring radio shows in the old days. I mean, Campbell Soup was always on there with Jack Benny or something, when I was a kid, and it was big. And it built brands, and people obviously like the product too. But people are more willing to change, and it's harder. it's a somewhat different world than what it is. Night and day. I mean, you are very unlikely to keep changing brands every day. But it really surprised me that Gillette lost position. I mean, men don't like to experiment much. Women are better experimenting. But you know, when you were a kid, the Gillette cavalcade of sports was your pal and brought you the Rose Bowl and the World Series and all that sort of thing. You just shaved with Gillette the rest of your life, and you still do to a great degree. But it's not exactly the same as it was even 5 years ago or so when we bought Kraft.
Don't change that much, but sometimes they do. Like newspapers was a business that you admired for so long. It's not a good business anymore.
No, newspapers went, if you're the only one in town, now there were some competitive situations, but it was survival of the fattest. Whichever paper was the fattest won, because it had the most ads in it, and ads are news to people. I mean, they want to know what supermarket's having the bargain on Coke or Pepsi this weekend and so on. I mean, it upsets the people in the newsroom to talk that way, but the ads were the most important editorial content from the standpoint of the reader. Overall, in any big daily, I mean, if you were looking for a job, you had one place to look, and that was the classified section. If you were looking for an apartment to rent, and those pages were just dozens and dozens of pages. That's disappeared. I mean, the things that are essential to you. News is what you don't know that you want to know. And you know what happened in national sports, the moment it happens, and you can go watch video of it and so on. You can go to ESPN and see what's going on in that. You know what's happening in politics. You know what's happening in the stock market. I used to look at the stock market pages the next morning. Before I delivered the papers, I checked them out. The world has changed hugely, and it did it gradually. It went from monopoly to franchise to competitive to
toast.
Toast.
Yeah, and sodas kind of like that too. I mean, they're still around, but
no, they're disappearing.
Right,
they're going to disappear.
Yeah, and so
New York Times won't, the Washington Post won't, the Wall Street Journal won't.